Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
I'm going to turn your attention next to that decision by... I need some copy on this, actually, sorry. That decision by the European Court to allow employers to forbid employees to wear any religious insignia whatsoever. Do you know, we talk a lot, Axel, on your toes, we talk a lot about penny drop moments on this programme. But that was one of my first ones. I love this job, you know I do. I love it more than is healthy. Even on the days where it involves me repeatedly smashing my head against a brick wall in the hope that one day the wall will break rather than my head. But one of the first penny drop moments for me, in terms of the dangerous tides that were beginning to flow over the last few years, came with the woman who wanted to wear a cross while she was working at British Airways. Do you remember? It ended up... it was a massive cause célèbre. And I thought British Airways were perfectly within their rights to tell her not to wear the cross, even though I am a Christian. Make of that what you will. I attend church. I was very much raised in the Catholic faith. And yet it seemed to me perfectly reasonable for any boss to say, you can't wear that. There's a no jewellery rule. And the more I explored it, the more hypocrisy emerged when Islam began to be demonised on a grand scale, partly understandably. Let's not get too sort of soft around the edges on this. Islam began to be scrutinised in an entirely new way after the September the 11th attacks, which were undertaken in the name of that religion, wrongly, obviously. But you can't blame people for suddenly going, hang on a minute, I better find out more about this religion. And what began to happen was that people who were passionately in favour of the woman wearing a cross at work were passionately against things like the face veil. And I remember, I don't know what the phrase is it cognitive dissonance or is it just epic hypocrisy? Where I would be pointing out to callers, back in the days when I was a lot more polite than I am now, I would be pointing out to callers that you're either in favour of employers being allowed to outlaw religious insignia or you're not. You can't, in a proper democracy, you can't have one rule for one faith and another rule for another faith. And that seemed to me to be so self-evident, so blindingly obvious, that I have led such a sheltered life. I hadn't really encountered people before who would have that pointed out to them and still cling to the support for one and opposition to the other. So, although the headline here, EU workplace headscarf ban is legal, says European Court of Justice, it isn't about headscarves. And look, it's possible I've got this wrong, but I don't think I have. There is obviously a reason why the headscarf appears in the headline, but that reason is simple. The case was brought by a receptionist fired for wearing a headscarf to work. This was at G4S in Belgium. And then the legality of having a ban on that is what has been examined by Europe's top court. But the finding says this: the visible wearing of any political, philosophical or religious sign. Okay? Employers are entitled to ban workers from the visible wearing of any political, philosophical or religious sign. So that means that the woman at Heathrow would not be allowed to wear her cross. The European Court of Justice has found. And yet how many people, and I'm not going to necessarily stick a label on you if you fall into this camp, how many people who think she should have been allowed to wear her cross, because this is a Christian country, even though I absolutely and comprehensively reject all Christian values like, I don't know, loving your neighbour and not committing adultery. I occasionally cite this as a Christian country when trying to win arguments without being called a racist. How many people who thought she should have been allowed to wear her cross will be cheering the idea that a woman's not allowed to wear a headscarf? You're cheering and booing the same thing, you prunes. So what this means, unless I've completely taken leave of my senses, is that employers, and this is the phone-in I want to have, because I hesitate to tell you that I'm in favour of this. I hesitate to tell you that I really welcome this. I don't like headscarves as part of religious garb, but that would mean that a nun could be told to take it off as well, which is not particularly problematical, because a nun is unlikely to be working for an employer who would want her to take her headscarf off. But I don't like the doctrines of modesty that many religions teach. It's only relatively recently that Christianity has sort of stepped away from some of these doctrines of modesty, telling women that they somehow should be more modest. I don't like that. There's a horrible story doing the rounds at the moment about a woman who was twerking, shaking her booty in a headscarf, and some absolute headbangers sort of going online to record abuse of her and criticism of her. I think Majid Nawaz talked about it at the weekend. I didn't listen to his show, but looking at social media, I think he piled in on this, and quite rightly so. I mean, that's absolutely sick. I don't know, though, whether or not the answer to someone being abused partly because they're wearing a headscarf is to get rid of the headscarf. I remember saying to a Jewish mother many years ago, before I realised just what a minefield it is to say anything about the Jewish faith in particular on this radio station. She told me about the anti-Semitic attacks that her son was suffering from. And I said, quite naively, how do they know he's Jewish? And she said, well, he wears a yarmulke. And I said, could he take it off? I mean, if he's really getting his head kicked in, shouldn't you tell him to take it off? Think about that just for a minute. It's no different from saying, okay, if you're getting abuse for wearing a headscarf from these backwards medievalists on YouTube, then maybe you should take your headscarf off. And I'm not comfortable with that, nor was the mum. Why should I take this off? Because of their hatreds. But if this is right, then an employer could tell that lad to take his yarmulke off. That is a visible wearing of any political, philosophical or religious sign, isn't it? So is a turban. Your boss could tell you to take off your turban. And if you don't like it, tough, you can go somewhere else. What else is there? What else would we put on this list? I mean, in the context of Christianity, it's more likely to be a crucifix, isn't it? It's more likely to be a crucifix or a cross around your neck. Always hear the echoes. Who's that comedian who was brilliant on how Jesus would feel if he came back to earth and saw everyone wandering around with a little image of him being killed, being murdered on it? Oh, what's his name? He died. It'll come to me. 10 minutes after 12 is the time. So I'm going to tell you straight, I quite like this. I'm not sure you should be allowed to import any religious insignia to the workplace if the boss doesn't like it. But if you're Jewish, you're hearing someone say that your boss should be allowed to tell you to take your yarmulke off. If you're a Sikh, you're hearing someone say that your boss should be allowed to take your turban off. So in a way, I kind of want this conversation to be about every religion other than Islam, because partly because there are times when it seems that's the only religion we ever talk about, but mostly because the whole point about a pluralist democracy, a liberal democracy that we still, thank God, are clinging on to for a little bit longer, is that everybody gets treated the same. So you are not allowed to object to the headscarf or even the veil, the full face veil, under the rules of democracy, unless you also object to the turban and the yarmulke and you could almost, I don't know if Hindus have the dye in the middle of their forehead just on special occasions, special feast days, but that would be filed under a religious insignia as well, wouldn't it? I couldn't come to work after Ash Wednesday if I still had the cross of ash in the middle of my forehead, put there by the priest. Do you see what this story is actually about? I want to know what you think of it. Not about the headscarf, but about the turban and the yarmulke and the, come on, give me something else. What other, name a religion. It's got every religion has some, and the crucifix and the cross, all of that. So do you think employers should have this right? The European Court of Justice has said they do, which means that at least for now, your boss can tell you to take your headscarf off. Your boss can tell you to take your turban off. Problematic, perhaps, for you. Your boss can tell you to take your crucifix off, your cross off. Your boss can tell you to take your skull cap, your yarmulke off. How do you feel about that? Give me a ring and tell me. Actually, can we try? I've been so lucky with Scottish calls in the first 2 hours. Actually, we could have continued all day, only taking calls from Scotland. I'm going to try something now. Is this going to work? Caroline's giving me that beady look. I only want you to call me if you wear some of these things. So I want to start off, and this might backfire horribly, and I'll have to come back after 12:15 shamefaced. You can only call me now if you wear a yarmulke as a Jewish man, or a turban as a Sikh man, or you believe that you should be able to wear your crucifix as a Christian to work. Okay? We'll crack on with the headscarves a little later, but unless I've completely misunderstood the ability to understand English, then the visible wearing of any political, philosophical or religious sign, including headscarves, puts all of those other items on the list. So, seek and you shall find. 0345 6060 973 if you wear a turban, okay? And if you wear a yarmulke, this is it. How do you, just tell me how you feel about it. Because as a liberal, Christian Democrat, I approve of this. I like the things, as we kind of touched on in the last 2 hours, I like the things that bring us closer together rather than the things that distinguish us. But I think freedom of religion is a pretty huge issue as well. Something that Donald Trump is sort of keen to undermine in America. We shouldn't really be undermining it here. I just don't buy, because in the Christian faith, nothing really fits into this category of compulsory. I don't buy the idea that you can't be a good Christian without wearing a crucifix. I think Sikhism teaches you can't be a good Sikh without wearing a turban. And many people take from the Quran the idea that you can't be a good Muslim woman without covering your head, or indeed a good Muslim man without growing a beard. Does a beard count as something that's being visibly worn? You wear a beard. It's a phrase that some barbers use. I don't know if I've got enough people listening wearing turbans and yarmulkes at the moment, but we will find out in the only way that we can. 0345 6060 973. Your boss, as of now, is allowed to ban you from wearing your turban or your skull cap or your headscarf. I'll start off with the first two. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. And if you are one of those people who cheered this when you thought it was just headscarves, and now the penny has dropped, which is what I'm here for every day, and you realise actually it's going to affect Jews and Sikhs and Christians as well, well, you can give me a ring and say sorry. Things are kicking off between Nicola Sturgeon and Theresa May, relevant to the conversation we had in the first 2 hours. I still can't see how Theresa May can possibly agree to a second referendum, but that is like handing Nicola Sturgeon a nuclear bomb or a blunderbuss. But we're discussing now something altogether different, and we're discussing the fact that whatever the headlines might be telling you, the European Court of Justice has just ruled that employers are entitled to ban workers from wearing turbans, yarmulkes, crucifixes, and, this one is in the headline, headscarves. How do you, as someone who wears one of those things, feel about that? Joe's in Dorking. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi, good afternoon. I think if you apply for a job and you feel that you can't fit onto the job because the requirement of a religious garb or whatever, then just find another job and go where you can't force yourself onto anyone. They should accept what you wear if this is not their requirement. Why should the organization bend their rules for every individual? Otherwise, if someone comes up with a new idea and...
But this is going to be retrospective. It's not just going to be apply now, pay later. It's going to be that the employer you're currently with is someone who wears it. What do you wear any of these garments?
I wear yarmulke, side locks, beard, the whole garb.
Okay, so your boss could now tell you, God, I forgot about side locks. Do you think that would count?
I get some stares, but...
No, I just wonder whether it would count as you wearing something. I mean, it's definitely for religious reasons. It would be the same as a Muslim beard, wouldn't it? A boss could say to you, I mean, you can have a no beard policy. I think Walt Disney had one. But if you currently work and your employer turns around to you tomorrow and says you can't work here anymore unless you get rid of the yarmulke, you would still defend your position, would you?
Yes, I would still defend my position.
You walk out the door without a complaint?
Absolutely.
Wow.
Because I look at it...
What if you couldn't get another job? I mean, as a Jewish man, you're a lot more familiar with these ancient hatreds than those of us who are getting a crash course in it since Brexit and Trump. What if you couldn't get a job anywhere?
If you really want, I mean, on my line of work, I find jobs all the time. Everyone, if you really want and you put your head to it, you start something up yourself. You know, you can't... You're talking about like anti-Semitism also, because
yes,
the end of the day is, as far as I look at it, anti-Semitism hardly exists. It's the way you take it. I get stared at. Sometimes people even shout at me, but it's like water off a duck's back.
Yeah, but that is anti-Semitism. It might not hurt you, and I'm glad it doesn't. But it doesn't give you the
No, but I feel
evidence to say it doesn't exist. Every time someone shouts at you, that proves it exists.
Yeah, but making a whole fuss out of it, it just adds fuel to the fire. So I mean, to be honest, I haven't experienced proper anti-Semitism ever.
Well, what do people shout when they shout at you then?
Yeah, but who cares?
Okay, I think I understand your position. I don't understand your definition of hatred or anti-Semitism, but we'll have that conversation another time. Yeah, I mean, that's principle. Problem is then, of course, what if you can't get a job? Joe can, but what if he can't get a job? Should he be allowed to get unemployment benefit if the reason why he can't get a job is that he refuses to take off his headgear? Want some turbans? Want more yarmulkes? Christians with crucifixes? And it's not just religious, also political, so you can't wear a trade union badge? I don't imagine. You can't wear your little TUC badge. That's political, right? Trade unions are political affiliation. Philosophical. You can't wear your I Love Plato T-shirt to work. 0345 6060 973. Heather is in Earl's Court. Heather, what do you think?
I think one has to be consistent. As you say, it's political and philosophical as well as religious. It's quite difficult to imagine anyone with no philosophy or politics or religion. You'll be talking about sort of blank slates.
Yes, but it's insignia. I mean, you can hold views and keep them to yourself. It's the visible wearing of any political, philosophical or religious sign.
Yeah, I understand that. I myself wear a CND medallion on a necklace.
Okay.
Campaign for nuclear disarmament.
Yes, thank you.
I wasn't told by my employers. I was a university lecturer before retirement.
It's compulsory, isn't it, in that line of work?
Sorry?
It's compulsory to wear a CND badge, isn't it?
I would like it to be, yes. I certainly wasn't told by the university department. But I was criticised by a head teacher on an occasion. I was interviewing students as one of their prospective lecturers. The head teacher might have had a student in school on work experience on teaching practice. She said she wouldn't have employed me, which was okay because I wouldn't have wanted to work with her. But I think one has to be. You've got to be consistent, and if you're liberal, if you feel that this is part of your identity, then I think it has to be allowed. It's very.
But you can't. Nothing's allowed. It's all banned. You can't wear your CND badge. He can't wear a turban. He can't wear a yarmulke, and she can't wear a headscarf. You cool with that?
That's horrendous. A completely illiberal view. Apart from being a university lecturer, I did teach in schools at one stage of my career.
It's usually liberal as a secular tradition, then it makes perfect sense. It's not remotely illiberal. If you see liberalism as an antidote to religious oppression, which, you know, there are many historical analyses that cast it in precisely that role, then the best way to stop religious oppression is to stop religious insignia. The best way to stop the process that leads to religious oppression is to stop people being allowed in public to declare what team they support.
So we all are complete non-entities.
Poppies, political affiliate. I mean, that would be tricky, wouldn't it? I mean, the world would go mad if anyone said you can't wear a poppy to work, but exactly the same people going mad about that are probably cheering the headscarf. And yet they are both political, religious or philosophical insignia.
Absolutely, yes. I'd allow all of them.
Well, that's the alternative. You allow all of them or none of them. I think that's kind of the point. 12:26 is the time. Couple of phone lines free. If you've tried and failed to get through, have another go now. Remember, I was about to ask Caroline why the switchboard was full and then empty again. It's because you're imposing the rule really strictly, aren't you? People are only allowed on if they wear a yarmulke or a turban or some other form of religious, philosophical or political insignia. I hadn't thought about the CND badge, but the poppies, wow, the poppies are huge. Would that count as political pacifism? I don't know. 0345 6060 973. Barry, you know me so well. First caller on this said, well, they should go and find another job then. And there's an audible thud as O'Brien's head hits the table. I don't know, actually, Barry, whether you do know me that well. If you want to work here, and I've got a no religious insignia rule, and you won't take your religious insignia off, well, it's curtains, isn't it? Deep's in Sudbury. Deep, what would you like to say?
It's a scary thought. I wear a turban, you know, and I really, you know, I always say this, where I'm quite happy and love it that we live in such a liberal country called the United Kingdom, that we accept everyone for who they are, what they are.
Yes.
And you know, in Europe, I get scared. You know, after all the things that have been going on and you know, if I was to bring up a Sikh child in France, they can't go to school because they wear a turban.
Is that true?
That is still true.
I didn't know that. I knew they'd banned the face veil in public place. You can't wear a turban in France.
It's a point blank thing. It's a point blank thing there.
Okay. Oh, so they've already got this rule in place in France.
Yeah. So it's come out from France. You know, the Sikh lobbyists, as far as I'm known, someone who's hearing can quote me on it. They've tried to overturn this in the European Parliament and fell flat on their face.
Well, we'll find out. I mean, individual states can do full-on bans on face veils. We've seen that in Austria. We've seen that in Bavaria. We've seen that in France. But what? Just remind me what the religious requirement is for you to wear a turban, Deep.
It's, you know, for me, it's a sign of identity for who you are. We stand up for the human rights for everyone, whoever in the world.
So you declare as a Sikh by wearing it. But what's the doctrine that?
Because, you know, again, a turban is a majestic cloth. Plus, to keep your hair, we're not allowed to cut.
That was it. Yes.
Any hair.
Yes.
So basically, it's a sign of cleanliness, keeping the hair clean at all times. Also, but in the Eastern philosophy, also a turban was as a crown. Yeah. Yeah. So you're majestic. You're not a pauper. You're equal to the man who's a landlord or a king. And etc.
Yeah, and I guess people don't realise, do they? That, I mean, can you imagine, even in the current climate, I would struggle to imagine anyone for no real reason telling you to take your turban off. Has it ever happened? Have you ever sort of encountered any employer-based...
In airports.
Yeah, that's in case, I mean, with the greatest of respect, that's in case you've got something hidden under it, isn't it?
Exactly, but I've said to them they can swab it, they can do whatever they like to it, yeah, but people have just grabbed it off and pulled it off, and you know, myself, I'm a quite calm person. I've got friends who've hit the roof with it, yeah? Yeah,
well, it just goes to show, doesn't it, how much of the spotlight has been focused on Islamic issues to the exclusion of all other religions, which is kind of how we've ended up here, I think. But this is what happens when you're trying to reduce the freedoms of one section of society, then inevitably any cogent legal system will reduce the freedoms that are enjoyed by other sections of society in the same context. But could I look deep in the eye and tell him? No, I don't think I could. It was, of course, Bill Hicks, whose name eluded me a moment ago when I was referring to the genius, sadly no longer with us, comedian, who speculated on what it would be like for Jesus to come back to Earth, the second coming, and see all the Christians wandering around wearing essentially a snapshot of his murder by wearing a crucifix around their neck. I think he said it'd be a bit like JFK coming back and finding that everyone in America was wearing a sniper rifle around their neck. But a lot of you suggested it might have been George Carlin or Dave Allen, who are both similarly irreverent and brilliant comics, but the one I was thinking of was Bill Hicks. So thank you for that. What on earth are you talking about, James, if you've been referencing Bill Hicks? Simple. European Court of Justice has just ruled that the workplace ban on religious garb, any political, philosophical or religious sign that you wear, is legal. So headscarves, turbans, yarmulkes, crucifixes, poppies, potentially, because UEFA decided the poppy was a political symbol, didn't it, during that England-Wales football game? I think we got fined for it. Swastikas, obviously, although I can't imagine anyone kicking up a massive fuss if their boss told them to take their swastika off. Actually, there's a couple of people... 12:36 is the time. Pritpal is in Clapham. Hang on, who's been waiting longer? Let's just go live as well to hear the Prime Minister's latest EU statement. Let's get that first.
Article 50 and beginning the process of leaving the European Union. The summit began by re-electing Donald Tusk as President of the European Council. I welcomed this because we have a close working relationship with President Tusk and recognise the strong contribution he has made in office. In the main business of the Council, we discussed the challenge of managing mass migration, the threats from organised crime and instability in the Western Balkans, and the measures needed to boost Europe's growth and competitiveness, which will remain important for us as we build a new relationship between the EU and a self-governing global Britain. In each case, we were able to show once again how Britain will continue to play a leading role in Europe long after we have left the European Union. First, on migration, I welcomed the progress in implementing the action plan which we had agreed at the informal EU summit in Malta last month. This included Italy strengthening asylum processes and increasing returns, and Greece working to implement the EU-Turkey deal, where the UK is providing additional staff to support interviewing of Iraqi, Afghan and Eritrean nationals. At this council, I argued that we must do more to dismantle the vile people smuggling rings who profit from the migrants' misery and who are subjecting many to unimaginable abuses. Mr. Speaker, with coordinated and committed action, we can make a difference. Indeed, just last month, an operation between our National Crime Agency and the Hellenic Coast Guard led to the arrest of 19 members of an organised immigration crime group in Greece. As I've argued before, we need a managed, controlled and truly global approach, and that is exactly what this Council agreed. We need to help ensure refugees claim asylum in the first safe country they reach, and help those countries support the refugees so they don't have to make the perilous journey to Europe. And we need a better overall approach to managing economic migration, one which recognises that all countries have the right to control their borders. Mr. Speaker, engaging our African partners in this global approach will be crucial, and this will be an important part of the discussions at the Somalia conference, which the UK will be hosting in London in May. Turning to the deteriorating situation in the Western Balkans, I made clear my concerns about the risks this presents to the region and to our wider collective security. Organised criminals and terrorists are ready to exploit these vulnerabilities, and we are seeing increasingly brazen interference by Russia and others. In light of the alleged Montenegro coup plot, I called on the Council to do more to counter destabilising Russian disinformation campaigns and to raise the visibility of the Western commitment to this region. The UK will lead the way. The Foreign Secretary will be visiting Russia in the coming weeks, where I expect him to set out our concerns about reports of Russian interference in the affairs of the government of Montenegro. We will provide strategic communications expertise to the EU institutions to counter disinformation campaigns in the region, and we will host the 2018 Western Balkans Summit. And in the run-up to that summit, we will enhance our security cooperation with our Western Balkan partners, including on serious and organised crime, anti-corruption and cyber security. More broadly, Mr. Speaker, I also re-emphasised the importance that the UK places on NATO as the bedrock of our collective defence. And I urged other member states to start investing more in line with NATO's target so that every country plays its full part in sharing the burden. For it is only by investing properly in our defence that we can ensure we are properly equipped to keep our people safe. Turning to growth and competitiveness, as I have said, I want us to build a new relationship with the EU that will give our companies the maximum freedom to trade with and operate in the European market and allow European businesses to do the same here. So a successful and competitive European market in the future will remain in our national interest. And at this Council, I called for further steps to complete the single market and the digital single market. I also welcomed the completion of the free trade agreement between the EU and Canada, and pressed for an agreement with Japan in the coming months. For these agreements, yes, just wait for it. These agreements will lay the foundation for our continued trading relationship with these countries as we leave the EU. At the same time, we will also seize the opportunity to forge our own new trade deals and to reach out beyond the borders of Europe to build relationships with old friends and new allies alike. This weekend, we announced a two-day conference with the largest ever Qatari trade delegation to visit the UK, building on the £5 billion of trade we already do with Qatar every year. And we will also strengthen the unique and proud global relationships we've forged with the diverse and vibrant alliance of the Commonwealth, which we celebrated on Commonwealth Day yesterday. Finally, Mr. Speaker, last night the bill on Article 50 successfully completed its passage through both houses unchanged. It will now proceed to royal assent in the coming days, so we remain on track with the timetable I set out 6 months ago. And I will return to this House before the end of this month to notify when I have formally triggered Article 50 and begun the process through which the United Kingdom will leave the European Union. This will be a defining moment for our whole country as we begin to forge a new relationship with Europe and a new role for ourselves in the world. We will be a strong...
And I think you can probably fill in the rest of the gaps yourself. Of course, the reason why this was slated and scheduled was the expectation that Theresa May would announce her intention and indeed provide a date for the triggering of that Article 50. And I thought we'd better keep an ear on it just in case something surprising did happen. I'm not qualified to comment on whether or not it did or not. Luckily, our political editor, Theo Usherwood, is here to tell us.
It was very much according to the form, but these types of occasions where you're planning to announce something and, of course, you can't announce it, and, of course, Theresa May was meant to trigger Article 50. It's all about filler, piecing in bits of information, little nitbits, to keep everybody interested. She said, and to much gales of laughter from the Labour benches, that when she visited the EU Council last week, she wanted to see a complete digital single market. She'd also said that the European Council should discuss the threat of Russian disinformation campaigns on the internet. This was meant to be, of course, her moment in the sunshine, Theresa May's moment in the sunshine, to announce that she had triggered Article 50. But as we all know, James, Nicola Sturgeon had other plans, and so Theresa May didn't want to be seen to inflame a row with the Scottish First Minister. Therefore, she's ducked the issue and kicked the can down the road to around the 26th, 27th of March.
26th, 27th of March, at which point we still won't, of course, know exactly what Europe's going to look like after all of the other elections in other European countries have taken place. Theo, thank you. I'm just going to see what Jeremy Corbyn's talking about.
Later this month, the triggering of Article 50, a process that will shape this country's future. There is no doubt that if the wrong decisions are made, we will pay the price for decades to come.
Fascinating. We're going to be late for the travel news if we don't crack on. I want more calls after that on the simple question of how you would feel as someone who wears a turban or a yarmulke or indeed any other form of religious, political or philosophical insignia about your boss ordering you to take it off. The number you need is 03456060973. It's just coming out to 1:45. I just want to show you. Interesting, because Theresa May laying out the terms of Brexit. Obviously, it's a bit of a damp squib today, given that she's not laying out the terms of Brexit. She doesn't know what the terms of Brexit are going to be. She doesn't even know what the United Kingdom's going to look like if Nicola Sturgeon succeeds in her quest for a referendum. But it was supposed to be announcing the triggering of Article 50. That's why this parliamentary time has been reserved. But I just want to share with you something on Twitter. I hesitated briefly to single out one individual, but I hope you don't mind John Halsall. I wouldn't put you in the box of trolls, mate. So it occurs to me, though, that you've replied to LBC tweets, and that is published now. You've published that in the public domain, something that you'd think would be blindingly obvious to everybody, wouldn't it? That publishing something in the public domain is publishing something in the public domain. And, of course, the more followers you have, the more public that publication becomes. But I don't know, some people apparently need to end up in the High Court to work that out for themselves. But I just read what you said about the Scottish referendum, and then I looked through to see what the last time you replied to an LBC tweet was, John. And this is in response to Lord Heseltine vowing to lead a Remainer revolt against the Brexit bill. Does this undermine the result of the referendum? And John starts off sarcastic. Good on him, bravo. And then John says, standing against British democracy, what a condescending idiot. We voted, you lost, get over it. Okay, which is, a fairly common refrain. That's what he said in response to the Heseltine Brexit story. I just want to tell you why I looked through the feed, because I think, John, unintentionally, you've explained why Theresa May is doing what she's doing, because this is what he said in response to the possibility of the United Kingdom breaking down if a Scottish referendum is held. Well, I, for one, am not prepared to be held to ransom by the poisonous cranky north of the border. If she wants to leave, let her. So, John, imagine if the other 27 countries in the European Union felt even a tiny bit like you do about Britain voting to leave. Imagine if, just because you're saying let her go, I can't, absolutely no deal, no blackmail, no sort of ransom is the word that you use. Just imagine if all those other countries in the European Union that you voted to leave feel the same way about Britain that you do about Nicola Sturgeon. And then tell me what sort of deal you think you're going to get. But you still won't get it, John. And when you turn your radio on, or you're back on Twitter in a few months' time, or in a year's time, and we've come away from Brussels with no deal at all, partly because of what you describe, partly because of what you feel about Nicola Sturgeon, but mostly because there's no deal to get. Freedom of movement's off the table, everything's off the table. And when Theresa May then tries to blame that on the European Union member states, you're going to be going along with it. And you're going to have the wool pulled over your eyes, not just on an industrial scale, but on a scale that almost beggars belief. Because if you can tweet, "We voted leave, get over it, get out," and in the same feed, in the same week, also say to Nicola Sturgeon, "I'm not going to be held to ransom by the poisonous cranky north of the border. If she wants to leave, let her," you are, without realising it, describing precisely the mindset that is going to leave us up a creek without a paddle. And when she tries to blame that on them, you're going to let her, aren't you? And that's why, for people possessed, dare I say, of a slightly more nuanced understanding of the world, that's why this mess is far from over. Because what the hell are they going to do? All the people who claimed that they made it clear we were going to have to leave the single market while stating categorically that we weren't going to have to leave the single market. All of these liars now pretending they never told lies at all. Farage, on the record, saying, "Don't be ridiculous. I find it laughable," I think he said, that a vote to leave the European Union referendum would lead Nicola Sturgeon to request another referendum in Scotland. It's on the record. All of these liars now pretending they never lied. And you're going to let them carry on, John, which is fine, mate. But maybe just dial down the abuse a little bit, because all it does is make you look vulgar as well as stupid. Stupid's fine. Vulgar and stupid, it's not a good look, John. Mind how you go. 12:54 is the time. Prit Pal's in Clapham to take us back to the religious garb, Prit Pal. I'm going to say that's a Sikh name.
Hi, James. Great show. I've been listening now for about a year.
Welcome.
You're probably going to fail my PhD, I think.
Oh, blimey. Yeah, it's not a great phone line, so just give me the straight heads up, if you pardon the pun, on how you feel about the possibility of your boss telling you to take your turban off.
I work in the NHS, so I think, I'm a doctor. If they turned around and told me, I couldn't wear my turban, that would be a major problem. I think you've already got enough doctors leaving, going aboard with the whole Brexit and everything else. I think if you started targeting certain groups, there'd be real problems. I mean, personally, I think I don't have an issue with people wearing things to identify where they're from. For me, it's not a religious thing; it's a cultural thing. It's a sort of a identity of my parents and where they're from originally. I'm fully British. I see myself as being British. When I see patients, I'm impartial. I don't impose my views on them, and regardless of who's in front of me, I treat them without any judgment. So I would expect the same back. So I don't see any issue with wearing any sort of identifiers or any markers. I don't see why the employer should force you to not wear these sort of things. As long as you're not imposing your views on people, I don't see a problem with it.
Well, I don't either, but the European Court of Justice does. And it means, regardless of the likelihood or the practicalities, so I think a lesson we've all learned recently is the reason you have to keep an eye on the laws and you have to keep an eye on governments is because they might change. And if you've allowed a decent government to bring in a law that a bad government could use to your detriment, then you've only got yourself to blame for not noticing it at the time. So you're probably right. No one's going to tell you to take your turban off now. But what if the needle shifts slightly on life and Sikhs replace Muslims as public enemy number one, and you have people in the street trying to rip your turban off your head and that kind of thing, so your employer says it's upsetting some of the patients, Prit Pal, can you just get rid of it, otherwise you're going to have to find another job?
I think they just need to be educated that you can't judge a whole group of people based on a couple of fanatics. It could easily happen, you're right, and it's something I worry about all the time. I mean, we get Sikh people at the moment get targeted as asylum because we wear the turban and it gets identified as being part of Islamic.
In America especially, I think you'd be even more exposed. Thankfully, Britain clings on this side of the Atlantic to a few of its old values regarding tolerance, decency, equality, kindness, niceness, while half the country is desperate to get rid of all those values. Prit Pal, take care. I want to squeeze in at least one headscarf. Zareen is in Stanmore. Are you my headscarf, Zareen?
I am your headscarf.
Marvellous. How do you feel about this?
Well, what I'll say is, there's always this issue always in society about Muslim women not integrating. There's the whole thing about learning English. They don't try to integrate. Muslims don't try to integrate as generally. If you're going to ban the headscarf, and the majority of women that I know who wear the headscarf are highly educated, professionals,
Yes.
Doctors, lawyers, chartered accountants, bankers, and they won't be able to go to work. So what do you want them to do? You can't have it both ways. You can't tell them that we have to integrate and then take away the one thing that would make us integrate as well.
I suppose integration would involve taking the headscarf off if we were going to be completely scorched earth about it, but then that becomes a sort of fascism of wardrobe, doesn't it?
Well, yes, exactly. And for me, I believe it's an obligation that I'm fulfilling.
Yes, I know you do.
A religious symbol. I am obviously educated. And I just want to put it out there that when I put the headscarf on, my father told me I'd never get a job and I'd never get married because I was wearing a headscarf, because he was totally against it.
Oh, really?
And,
gosh,
yes.
These
and
little snapshots.
Yeah, so I was one of the first people out of my friends to get a training contract to be a solicitor, train as a solicitor, and one of the few ones to get married as well, quite early on.
So it doesn't. Well, no, it need not be an obstacle to anything. I haven't read the European Court of Justice's full ruling, but it is. I think you're persuading me, actually, that everybody should be allowed to carry on wearing their stuff. I suppose the reason why I felt that the British Airways woman shouldn't be allowed to wear her crucifix was because it was a rule that applied equally across all religions. And as long as it applies equally across all religions, so you get rid of all the headbangers saying, oh, Christians should be allowed to do this, or Muslims should be allowed to do this, or Jews should be allowed to do this, but all the other religions shouldn't. I can go with all or nothing, I guess, I think. And I'm out of time. Danny, my apologies. Harry Crap, Manjit. Quite a lot of Sikh names on the board here. Sukhbir, what a great name. Sabjit. We'll do it again another time, I promise you. 2 hours of almost exclusively Scottish callers and 1 hour of exclusively people who wear religious headgear. Sheila Fogarty has not got her surplice on.
No, but I am wearing that barbed wire thing around my thigh. It's fine, don't worry.
Cypress Day.
Yeah.